Okay? Oh, yeah, I guess it would help some.
How are you?
I don't like his traditional clothing too. Like, why can't they just look?
Girl, my mother, she did her everything like this. I mean,
No,
I said, Mom,
no, nothing. No, nothing.
I said, no, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yes, that's not it. No, you're right.
You're a good girl.
She had it this morning. She always has it in the morning. Make it feel
Are there any additional open seats?
There's some floor space up here if somebody wants to sit on the floor. You say, who's sit on the floor? People sit on the floor. Y'all sit on the floor? What happened? When I was in college, I sat on the floor. That is a good Oh, you're fine. I haven't started.
Who you trying to go to, the girl or the music?
You ready? Okay. All right, so I got the green light to go. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing, ladies, today? So this is after lunch. Your stomachs are full if you had lunch. So I hope that you don't get sleepy, but I'll try to project and make sure you need a seat. You need a seat. We need another seat. They got a chair right there. So my name is Iona. I have been working with children to combat child abuse for over 25 years. And I've been working specifically with human trafficking for the past 15 years. And 16 years of that, I have been a forensic interviewer. I worked at 2 children's advocacy centers, one in Howard County, and also the current one that I'm working in is here in Baltimore City. One of the questions that came up during the morning session was what was the thing that actually, that defining moment that caused me to realize that this is the field that I wanted to be working in and how I was going to continue that. And while there's one defining moment that we have, but then there are so many redefining moments that come up. And I've had many redefining moments, but one started in college was that defining moment of the fact of realizing that youth need a voice. Because for so long, youth are stifled and they don't have a voice sometimes in sharing their experiences. So they need a voice. And so do women. They need a voice as well. And throughout the years, there have been redefining situations from me talking with survivors, from me having different situations and experiences that I've witnessed, to the youth that I've actually been advocating for and actually working with. And professionally, one of the first cases that I received, when there was a 2-year-old, I was working as a social worker, and I was a CPS worker, Child Protective Services. And so at 4:30 on a Friday evening, I received a call basically saying that I had a case to go out on. So me and the detective got in the car, we went to the address, and during the course of the investigation, we found out that this 2-year-old basically had 5 STIs, sexually transmitted infections. She was overweight, and she was being sold by her mother for heroin. She was also being depicted in child sex abuse images and they were being produced and distributed. And from that case, I got to see her evolve. There was different things. The doctors said that because she was so young and her weight was so high and she had all of these infections, that she probably was going to be developmentally delayed. She might have some problems with her speech as well. 5 years later, she had come into her weight. She basically also was being adopted. And she had some developmental delays, but she was not intellectually disabled, as some of the doctors thought that she was actually going to be. And she was very responsive. And I tell that story in the beginning because I say how when I go through this presentation, the sexual trafficking, human trafficking of individuals did not start in 2000 when the law was enacted in the federal government. It didn't start after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in the 1800s. It's been going on basically for centuries, even in the biblical times. So where do I work now? Baltimore Child Abuse Center. We see over 1,000 children annually. That's for forensic exams, family advocacy, mental health, as well as for medical examinations. We partner with law enforcement, federal, state, and local. And we partner with social services, prosecutors, and the mental health and hygiene department. So today, this afternoon, I just wanted to hit 4 points for you about what is human trafficking in Maryland, what that actually looks like. So first, we'll start off with just to get the elements of what trafficking really is, and then we'll go through some understandings about the different variables of trauma and how that actually has an impact on the survivors. And then we'll go through some of the different developments that have happened in Maryland, legislation, programs, and then how you actually can respond and how our agency has responded as well. Baltimore Child Abuse Center. I am not the type of person who only wants to be talking, so I will be asking questions throughout. If I see you engaged and you're not raising your hand, I don't mind calling on you because I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful because I shouldn't be the only one talking, and we learn from one another anyway. So it's so important. With that said, when you look up at that screen, tell me what you see. And you can just call out the answer. I hear peace. I hear what? A cube. Uh-huh.
Oh, dang.
What else do you see?
Female.
Arrows. You see anything else? A table?
A table.
Okay. You see anything else?
The female gender.
Cubes, yes. Uh-huh. So basically, Leonardo da Vinci says all our knowledge has its origin in perception. When you look at this, you see there were different perceptions. People saw this differently. I put this up in the very beginning because as we discuss and as we, journey together today, people are going to have different perceptions. You came in here with a different perception. My only hope is that when you leave, you have another broadened perception about what we're talking about. So, yes, slavery still exists. So, how many people have actually been to seminars, anything about human trafficking before? Okay, that's a very small number. The ones who have, and even who haven't, when you hear the words human trafficking, what are the things that come to mind? Just blurt them out.
Forced prostitution.
Forced prostitution.
Unwillful sex work.
Unwilling sex work. Anything else? What else comes to mind?
The movie Taken.
The movie Taken. Yes, Taken 1, 2, and 3. Yes. Say it again. Exploitation of young women.
And men.
And men, thank you. I know there's no men in here, but I was told that this is mostly a women's college, so that would probably be why you wouldn't have so many male students here. Except for pharmacy, right? Except for pharmacy. Can somebody read that job description for me? Out loud, yes.
Candidates willing to be abused, beaten, starved, raped, and locked up may apply in person.
Is that a job that you would apply for?
No.
But that is a job description. Because that's exactly what we're talking about. This is exactly what happens during when somebody is being exploited commercially, when somebody is being trafficked, when somebody is put in slave and bondage. Somebody is telling them what to do. So here are some myths. You might have heard of them. The fact that this only happens to women. The fact that it is a choice. There is a survivor from DC, 19 years old. She talks about, well, she's not 19 now, but when she was 19 years old, she talks about how she was working late at night and she had a little baby. And so she was taking care of her baby, and she would take care of her baby during the daytime, and so that she could work at night and have somebody come in. Well, one night her baby was colicky, and so she really wanted to stay just a little bit longer with her child, but she stayed just a few seconds too late and she missed her bus. So she's standing at the bus stop, which was going to come another 15 minutes, but it was going to cause her to be late for her job. And here comes this older gentleman in a nice vehicle, pulls up there and says, "Hey, baby girl, can you get in the car? You know what? You don't need to be literally standing out here. It's too late. There's not a lot of light. There's not people here. Just get in the car with me and we'll drive to the next bus stop. And when you get there, it's more lit and there's more people there." So her first instinct, because she is in DC, and this was in DC, she's like, "There's no way I'm getting in the car with you." But then she thought to herself, "Well, he looks to be in his 50s. I'm 19. If anything pops off, I'll be able to take care of myself." She gets into the car. They ride just up one stop sign, and as they get to the next stop sign, two guys get in the back of the car. There's a gun to her head. Another guy gets in the front car. The older guy gets out. There's money exchange. They take her to an apartment complex, and then the guy who now becomes her trafficker, her pimp, says, "I know your name. I know who you are. I know where you live. I know your son's name. I know where you work. If you don't do this for me, then I'm going to go get your son." What did you think she did? Huh?
She went with him.
She went with him because she wanted to protect her son. So it was a choice, but it was a forced choice.
Wait, so he just like stopped her?
Yes, he was stalking her. Exactly. He was watching her. One of the things I always tell my daughter, I said, "Somebody's always looking at you." Of course, she told me that was kind of creepy. But then I said, you know, it's not creepy, just the fact that somebody's always looking at you. They're looking at you to see what you're doing, how you're doing. But there could be some other seedy people, predators out there who are looking at you to see your vulnerabilities, just to see if there's something they can use. Another one I wanted to pull out was that individuals with disabilities are not affected. What we're seeing and what we found out is that this is such a high vulnerable piece now because there are so many people with developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities who can't, who are very highly susceptible. Why do you think that is? Yes.
Because oftentimes people with disabilities are more vulnerable because they can't necessarily take care of themselves in the manner that somebody who is well responsible can.
Absolutely. We did a case where there was a 35-year-old woman who had the developmental capacity of a 5-year-old. And she was actually being victimized. She had 2 pimps. And the information that we got to her was completely valuable. And so the law enforcement was able to put away both of her pimps. But to her, she didn't really understand what was happening. The reality of human trafficking is that in the state of Maryland, it is child abuse as well as in other states too. 17 years or younger, you cannot consent. I don't care if you're 16 years old or not, even though that is the law. You cannot consent to being sold or being bought for any type of purpose. The TVPA, the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, from 2000 on upward to 2017, I think was the last revision, states that it's the recruitment, transportation, harboring, and receipt of another individual for any type of commercial exchange that takes place. Whether that's sleeping on a couch, whether that's giving you food, whether that's paying for a school uniform, whatever. Any type of exchange, drugs, anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be paper and coins. It can just be any type of commercial aspect. It's a violation of human rights, slavery and bondage. The Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery, and it didn't start it either. The transatlantic slave trade did not start it. It just started with the race piece, but it didn't start slavery. Slavery has been happening since the very beginning in the Bible days, even with the Egyptians, which is also Africa, even with the Egyptians in the Roman Empire. A multi-billion-dollar business that affects over 21 million individuals. And the CDC says that it's a disease. They're looking for it to actually come in and say it should be a disease that plagues our nation. I told you about some of those other definitions, the TVPA. There's also the UN definitions. There's the Department of State definition. There's the Department of Labor definition. And all of these different definitions have a whole bunch of stuff. If you read the UN, you can look up the United Nations definition. And I can tell you a lot of people are like, what does this mean? Why are you using all of these words just to say what I just said? So we've got the state, which looks very small. This is all the state's definition for Maryland. It's really tiny. And then we've got Department of Human Services, which basically in 2012, we said in our state, you know what, we need to make sure that the abuse of it, that the selling and the buying of an individual 17 years or younger needs to be child abuse. So they put it right under child sex abuse. However, if you're familiar with Department of Human Services, then that means you have to follow those regulations and those statutes under what it says under the law, which means that that social worker who's actually investigating that case needs to see the perpetrator within 60 days of the time that they are actually get that case. And we said, you know what, we can't do that because we need to also keep those workers safe. So there's no way we can say for you to go to that perpetrator because this is organized crime. It's like going to the Godfather in the Mafia and asking them questions. How much information do you really think you're going to get? 2017, we made a definition change in Maryland, and we said, you know what? This is what we need to do. We need to make sure that we're not just targeting those who basically have a pimp trafficker, but they also are out here because, quote unquote, maybe for survival sex, because they feel that society basically is enforcing them to get money, and this is the only way they can do so. So they're also being victimized. So I say that our biggest trafficker basically is our society, because our society allows it to take place. Our society says that it's okay to buy another individual, to enforce cheap labor, and say to individuals that, you know what, it's okay for us to treat human beings as a commodity, as a product, and not as value and as worth. Any questions? Elements of force, fraud, and coercion. 17 years old and younger, you don't need it. However, the law says you need it for adults. Why do you think you need it for 18 years and up? Even though force, fraud, and coercion takes place all the time. Why do you think we need it? Yes, you.
I guess because when you say they're 17 years and younger, it means they don't have it. Even if they give consent, their consent isn't acceptable. But if you're 18 and up, technically consent is acceptable. But if it's forced, then you can say that's non-valid.
That's very good. So the fact of the matter is that you're absolutely right. You cannot give consent, and you don't need force, fraud, and coercion for those cases, 17 years and younger, But how do you put somebody in bondage? How do you put somebody in a position where they feel that they are strapped and they cannot move, they can't get out of a situation? You coerce them, you threaten them, and you force them even in their psyche. So you still have the presence of force, fraud, and coercion. It's just that they realize because of the age of the individual, you don't need it. And the fact when we know that the brain does not fully mature until the age of 25, and the prefrontal cortex is the prefrontal cortex is actually the last piece to actually develop, which gives you that reasoning, God bless you, that reasoning ability so that you can actually reason in a certain way. Is 17 too young? Is 18 too young? Because are there any people in here as freshmen who are over the age of 25? No. So you guys all have, your brains are not fully developed yet. Acts, means, and purposes. There's an act that takes place where there's the recruitment, the transportation, the transfer, the receipt of something. But then you have your power that takes place, where you have that control, that force, that threat, the coercion, manipulation, abduction, the fraud. Alicia Kay is someone from Pennsylvania. She's a 13-year-old, true story. She basically was talking on social media using the app Friends of a Friend of a Friend, who, this is not an app that lots of people know about, and it was only in Pennsylvania, and it's no longer a social media app. So her victimization happened in the early 2000s, and she thought she was talking to a peer. She was talking, she was chatting. It was like, how she describes it is that when you go to a party and your friend says, oh, this is my friend Jan. Oh, and Jan, this is my friend Kate, and this is my friend Lisa. So she was talking to friends of friends of friends. And so there was a guy who got on who she thought was a friend of another person who was an age mate. Come to find out, he was a sexual predator. He was a registered sexual offender. And he was able to manipulate and coerce and say all those great things that a lot of adolescents want to hear, because adolescents always want to be validated, and adolescents want to have the attention on them. It's just development. So he used all of that. She came from a 2-parent home. She was very close with her family. Yet during a family dinner, she walks out of the door, leaves the door partly open, goes partly down the street where the car is waiting, where she thought she was going to meet an age mate. But it turns out to be that she met a man. And before she could turn around, the man grabbed her, put her in the car, took her across state lines, took her into Virginia, and then began to use sadomasochism situations with her while he victimized her on live feed. And people had to actually buy into the feed to watch everything that was happening. Yes. Sadomasochism. So basically, it's just like, hooking somebody up to the easiest way to say it. So you bound somebody so that they're not able to move, and then you are the person who then not you, but another person is performing all of these ritualistic things that are torturous. So maybe like instead of putting, we'll be graphic, instead of putting a penis inside of the vagina, you're putting the penis inside of the vagina plus maybe some broken glass, maybe and just many different things, and it's getting an arousal, or you're having sexual intercourse on a bed of nails, or it's all to have pleasure. The thought is that pleasure is part of pain. So the more pain that you get, the more pleasure you're going to have. And if I say anything that causes you to be uncomfortable or that you don't like, or, it's okay to take a breather. And I meant to say that in the very beginning. The door's open, you can take a step out just to, regain everything. And I'm not going to be too graphic, just a little.
No, be graphic.
Huh?
Be graphic. You can be graphic.
You said I could be graphic?
Yeah.
Okay. So, So the AXTA means yes. She said, be graphic. Yes, so Alicia Kay, she was rescued. FBI actually came in. One of the actual persons who was looking at the live feed got a conscience and said, you know what, I'm going to get caught. So he made an anonymous tip to the FBI and said that what was happening, and they went in and they got her. She has been, she's now living in California. She's married, she has children, and she actually goes and speaks across the country. So she's got different video clips up. I usually share one of her video clips, but we just don't have time for that today. But yes. It's Alicia Kay. It's actually Alicia Kazakowicz. But because her name is so, but you can put in, if you put in Alicia Kay, Pennsylvania, abduction, you should pull it up. So your action means, and the purpose is all for some type of gain, whether it's sexual exploitation, pornography, prostitution, cheap labor, or organ removal. We have not seen an organ removal case in the state of Maryland, but there are organ removal cases in the United States. Does everybody understand when I say organ removal? A little bit. So basically, it's just the fact that, say someone in another region is sick or well, but they have a body part that another person needs, they will go and get that body part. They will steal the body part. Or they will coerce the person to give them the body part and pay for it. So say, oh, have this, let me take one of your kidneys and I will give you $10,000 for your kidney so that I can sell it to another person for $100,000 because they need a kidney. Because the kidney list is so long for kidney transplants and they want to get a kidney. Who's vulnerable? Everybody. Everybody's vulnerable. Illegal immigrants, LGBTQ, history of abuse, chronic runaways, developmentally disabled, which we talked about, and of course homeless. There was a study that went out, a couple of studies that came out about homeless youth, which basically were saying that they are very highly vulnerable to being trafficked. Because why? What do you think? Because they're homeless. It's just very simple. They're homeless. And what traffickers do is they give you a place to stay, they give you a bed, they give you money so that you can eat, they give you things, clothes so that you can wear, so that you can now do their bidding. We see trafficking most with labor and sex. Those are the two main ones. Like I said, there are others, but these are the two main ones that come up. And these are the things that we've seen here, not just in the state of Maryland, but in our nation. We haven't seen a nail and hair braiding salon for labor, but we have seen it in New Jersey, and there was a case about that case in New Jersey. There was a case in New Jersey of two Nigerian individuals who came over as teenagers, and they actually were working for a company, and the FBI did an operation, and when they found them, they were sleeping on soiled mattresses, they had no sheets, they had, the housing that they lived in was condemned and deplorable, and they were working up to 17 to 20 hours a day braiding hair.
Oh, no.
Pornography, child sex abuse imagery, we do see that. You see that a lot with the trafficking cases that we have, because it's also used as a tool also for sextortion as well. There's a lot of people, in high schools and middle schools, we do a lot of social media trainings where we're saying that once you hit send, it's gone. You have to recognize that it's gone. You can delete it as much as you want, but it's gone. And it's out there for the whole world to see and view. So this one is a really challenging one, because for those individuals who actually have been victimized also in their trafficking through pornography, their images are being seen all across the nation and all across the world, and the things that are happening with those images, they don't know. So that's a different type of trauma that they're experiencing that they need to work through. Influences for foreign born. Because they're coming in and They come in from a different country into the United States. We don't know why they're coming in. They might be coming in, they don't have a firm grasp of our culture or what our language is, so that puts them in another place of vulnerability. No support network, they're physically isolated. So when we find out about these individuals and they're actually being trafficked, there's another response that we need to provide to them as well, because the trust value of how we need to build that up for that individual is going to take a little bit more time. Their fear, because where they were from, we had a case that came in from the Dominican Republic. There was a 15-year-old who was sent from her grandparents to come here to live with her mother, who she had not seen in years, and she came with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was an older man, and her boyfriend, once they got to the United States, began to sell her. It took us a while because we also had to help bring in things that were going to help her regain a comfortability with her mother, who she hadn't seen in years. So at first, she was not placed with her mother. She was placed in foster care, and then she was placed with her mother. But when she came over here, she did not speak any English. We just happened to have a Spanish-speaking forensic interviewer, so they did everything in Spanish, and so we were able to provide resources in her language as well. Now, the effects of risk. I'm not saying that you need to have all of these and then you're going to get trafficked. No. What I'm saying is that when these are all present, it increases the vulnerability of somebody being trafficked. That's all. One can increase the vulnerability, and all four just increase it even higher. We have a program. I am now the anti-trafficking and exploitation program manager at my job, and one of the programs we have is the juvenile missing persons response, because what we see is that a lot of youth who are going out, we realize that if you are a youth and you're leaving your home, you're either going to be homeless or you're running someplace, but what you're running from is also important. Why are you leaving? We're not saying that you are a bad child or that you just can't control your emotions or anything. We're saying there is a reason that they're running, and they're running someplace, so we need to find out what's happening, because this is a highly vulnerable population. Some behavioral indicators, if you work with any type of youth or in any youth-serving organizations and you see these are not red flags for you to say, oh my gosh, this person is being trafficked. These are just red flags for you to say, oh, there's something else that could be going on. Maybe there is something else. Maybe they are being trafficked. That's all we're saying. We're saying that if there's a history of arrest of prostitutions or using trafficking language, if they're sitting up there and saying, oh my God, last night I need to have a quota. Well, yeah, really? What was your quota? What do you mean a quota? Or they sit there and they're like, oh my gosh, we were talking to this other girl and she became a renegade. Well, what does that mean? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to dialogue and go on in and do an investigation. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying, though, is that you can go to those individuals who are having those conversations and you can say, how are you doing? That's really the only thing we're asking. Just be able to say, how are you doing? And if it's a friend, say that you're here for them. The reason why we say that is because there was a 13-year-old survivor who basically was walking in the mall at 11 o'clock during a school day, and the security guard said to the 13-year-old, why are you out of school? Instead of going to the adult and saying, why are you with this 13-year-old? Physical indicators, like I said earlier, the 2-year-old had multiple STIs, but there's also branding that takes place. Does everybody know what branding is? Okay. So you're making property. You're putting your mark on your property. Using burner phones. If you have a youth that comes in a home and she's been missing, they filed multiple missing persons reports, and she came out, she didn't have a job, but now she's walking in and she's got her hair done, she's got her nails done, she's got a burner phone on her that she didn't have before, she's got new clothes. Those are red flags. So the missing persons, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, basically puts out this list every single year. So the last year for 2017, they had 25,000 runaway reports that came into them, and of them, they found out that 1 in 7 was a child that was going to be highly vulnerable to being victimized. And out of that, they found that 88% were already connected to Department of Social Services because of the vulnerability. So it increases. So just saying that it doesn't mean that they're saying they're trafficked. They're saying that it increases their vulnerability to being trafficked and sexually exploited. Any questions? Okay. So getting into understanding the variables, we've got our first video.
She was 4 years old the first time a man looked at her, the way a man looks at his wife on their wedding day. Little girls are supposed to dream about being models and doctors and veterinarians. Instead, she fought sleep, eyes wide with terror of another night greeted by her stepfather's shadow. He was a real monster in her bedroom, and Mom, she was too fragile, too selfish to accept the truth that her little girl's innocence had been stolen one night when her boyfriend decided she wasn't good enough anymore. And since the little girl never had a real father, she accepted his advances because he always promised her his touches were acceptable, because he loved her. When you don't know yourself and you don't love yourself, you will fall for anything that sounds like love and feels like love. She was a walking corpse, stained with the fingerprints of strangers. And all she wanted was to walk the earth without the heaviness, the weight of all the men who tore a piece of her and took it with them. She never made it to see her 18th birthday. This is for the pain, for the stains that bath water won't wash away, for the scars of the hurts of the fatherless child. This is for the girls objectified instead of praised like queens. This is for the agony, growing up without a father, but all you really want is love, and you don't understand love. So one day when some guy stops you in a train station or a street corner and tells you you're beautiful, you are quickly intrigued. You like the fact that someone notices you, and you will do anything to feel like he's everything, and he promises you everything, and the things he convinces you to do, they don't seem that bad, and afterwards he shows you how much he loves you. Your morals are abandoned on that sidewalk where you turned your first trick. Your beauty is left in that hotel room where some stranger touched you like his girlfriend and then left the money on the nightstand. And every night, you die again, compromising your worth for what your pimp calls love and security. The hustle, the street lights, the schemes, it never seems worth it, but you have the liquor to comfort your fears, and as long as your profits meet expectations, you will have what you always wanted your whole life. Love. Love that doesn't feel right, but it's all you think you're worth, so you take it every day. You sleep when the sun comes up, rise when the sun is down. Conceal the toilet with makeup and stylish hairdos. Put on your best outfits. Something arousing because you have to make them happy. The men, the tricks, the pimps. This is for the pain. This is for America. In hopes that you will notice that 12-year-old girl who was forced to trade her lunchbox and sneakers for a Chanel purse and pumps. This is for the 16-year-old girl kidnapped by a gang of men on her way to school and held captive in a house right next door to you. This is for the 20-year-old girl who took her last beating today because she couldn't bring herself to let another man hold her down and violate her. We are all slaves for love, degrading ourselves for acceptance of a man that's the closest thing to a father figure we've ever known. We were once just girls with aspirations and a small piece of hope. Now who will notice us? Who will save America's daughters?
So we look at this. What are some of your first thoughts when you listened and you looked?
Listening, I can like feel the pain.
Mm-hmm.
That like people that go through this, but yeah, I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Having an absent father can really affect your life.
Mm-hmm. And why they say it's an absent father, even having a present mother that is also absent, or a present father that is also absent. So any type of family dysfunction also does have that effect as well. Any other thoughts? Did anything that was said make anyone upset? I see some shaking of the heads. Yes?
Makes me sad because not even just focusing on this video, but just sex trafficking as a whole affecting young women all across America globally. I hate the societal perception of these women and the blame that follows them everywhere.
Yes.
For sex trafficking, sex trafficking is for hearing, but it's not the victim's fault. It's
No.
not. And it pisses me off when people make it seem like that, and they're passing judgment.
Good point. Did anything else make anyone else mad or angry? Yes.
When it said that that 12-year-old girl traded in her lunchbox for a Chanel purse and heels.
Yes.
When it said she took her lesbian because she didn't have it in her to allow another man to hurt her or like force her to have sex. And another thing, I find it, I don't know why, things like this, I find it really hard. Like, as much as I feel like, no, never mind. I can't even get my words out.
Okay.
I don't want to hurt anybody by saying that, so.
Okay. You can say it later if you want to. So this focuses on America's daughters, but there was one person who did say that boys are also being trafficked, and they are. So even when I give my presentations, I do focus too also on the boys as well. This presentation today is focused on women and girls, but trafficking is not just for women and girls. They're not the only ones who are being victimized. There are boys who are being victimized a lot. There's LGBTQ that are being victimized a lot. More so than some of the statistics that are actually out there that are saying. There's the stigmatization upon the males, which is why they're not coming forth as much as they would, because males and females are different. And that leads us to now when we talk about trauma bonding. Has anyone ever heard of this term before? Yes? No? Okay. I was like, I thought I heard a yes, but then I saw the shaking head, so no. Trauma bonding is basically, there's two types of trauma. You have your complex trauma and you have your individual trauma. Everybody's probably experienced some type of trauma in their life, whether it's the fact that your tooth fell out, or the tooth fairy didn't come when you were a little child and you really wanted to get that money from the tooth fairy and it didn't come, or the fact that you witnessed your parents going into a car accident, or you were in a car accident, or your parents have been divorced. Whatever the situation is, those are types of trauma. The complex trauma that we're talking about with here, which happens with the trauma bonding, is the fact that this is an incident that is so impactful that happens over and over and over again, and that there is just no type of relief. So there's somebody who's been sexually abused, somebody who's been, that same person has been physically abused, that same person has been bullied, has been cyberbullied, that same person has felt isolated, and now that person is being trafficked. So all of these individual traumas add up into one, and now it causes that individual to be a different person. And so if someone, you might have heard it, where they say the 30-year-old who has been in the game or in the life basically for now 20 years, which means she had to start it when she was 10, why doesn't she get out? Have you heard these things before? Yes. You talk to a survivor, and they say, how dare someone even ask that question? Because they have no idea what it takes to just survive each and every day in an atmosphere that they didn't ask for, that they didn't want, that they did not choose. They didn't choose to be in bondage. They didn't choose to be enslaved. They might have chosen to take care of their son, but they didn't choose to be in bondage. They didn't choose to be sold. It's the perceived inability to leave or escape, even when the escape window and door is there. There's a research about learned helplessness. Martin Tyker, who is a neurobiologist up at McLean Hospital, which is in Boston. And he talks about how childhood trauma rewires your brain, and there are so many different consequences. I already said about how we discussed that our brains are not fully developed until we're 25 years old. Then you add trauma on top of that, then that makes that individual even more susceptible. They tied an elephant to a stake, and they made sure that that elephant couldn't knock down the stake. They forbid the elephant to knock down the stake, and so the stake wouldn't do it. It wouldn't go anywhere. When they untied the elephant, and the elephant was older, and the elephant was now bigger than the stake, the elephant was now bigger, and we know how big elephants are. The elephant still didn't knock down the stake. How come? Because he was trained not to. So if you are trained not to talk to professionals, not to call the police, not to talk to your family, then when the opportunity presents itself, it makes it even more challenging for you to do that, which is where you have that Stockholm Syndrome situation happening. So the cycle of change, you start off with the pre-contemplation. You know that you don't need to be in this situation. You know you have to get out of the situation. You contemplate and decide that you're going to get out. You try to start making those preparations. You actually get out. And then you're like, oh my God, how do I survive out here? There's no assistance here that really helps me. And so now it's like, well, if I relapse and I go back to the familiar, then at least I will have a roof over my head. If daddy's going to beat me, he says he's going to beat me if I don't make my quota, which is basically a term of saying if I don't do when he tells me that I'm supposed to sleep with 15 people in one night, and I'm supposed to bring him home $3,500 and I only bring him home $2,585, then that means a beating is coming. I know that. Out here, I'm not sure. So it's important that when we look at our survivor services, we begin to build those up, and we say and see that, you know what, we need to make sure and have that understanding that when we provide the services to these survivors, we're letting them know we understand that there's a conditioned thinking that you have, and that it's going to take a little bit of time. So the 15-year-old who is sleeping in the group home, and she puts her towel down on her bed and it's moved the next day, that's her towel, and she goes off and now she's tearing up the place. It's because her towel was moved and you didn't tell her that her towel was not supposed to lay on her bed. So we have to be thoughtful about those things. Factors that influence buyers. I do not call them Johns, because John is a word that means deity, and my father is named John, and I'm a daddy's girl. And my father he's not a buyer. So therefore, I would never associate him like that. So, and those people who are buying individuals and using them as products, they don't need to be deitized. Cheap, accessible goods. We're all buyers. Has anyone ever gone through the slavery index? You have? Do you find out how many slaves are working for you?
Oh yeah, we did.
We did a religion class.
Oh, yeah.
You did that?
Yeah.
One of my colleagues said she had 65 slaves working for her.
I forgot.
So there's an index where you go onto online, you put in the types of products that you actually buy and purchase, and they tell you whether or not you have people who are working for you that are in slave or bondage. Because some of the products that we buy that we don't realize are basically not coming from those wonderful fair trade markets. Anybody watch The Equalizer? Okay, there's more in here who watch The Equalizers than this morning's class. So I love the movie. However, it is a false depiction of what's really taking place. Because the reason why I say it's a false depiction is there's not a really great person, that wonderful character of Denzel Washington that comes in and beats up all the bad guys, literally by himself, with no assistance whatsoever, and then rescues this woman and saves her. That just doesn't happen. Just like in Taken 1, 2, 3. It doesn't happen. And when you talk to survivors, you realize it doesn't happen that way. However, the exchange, which I think is very powerful in the movie, I think there's so many different scenes. There's one scene in there when they're sitting at the diner and Denzel Washington's character is talking to the youth who was brought over here from a different country and says, you know, you and I really know what I really am. That's what the girl is saying. And then Denzel Washington's character says, I think you can be anything you want to be. And then the girl says, maybe in your world, Robert, it doesn't really happen in my world that way. And Robert's response is, change your world. When you talk to survivors, they will tell you it's not that simple to change their world. It doesn't happen that way. We just went through that whole cycle. You think about it, you contemplate it, you do it, you move, you have the action, and then you have to have that maintenance, and then you relapse. Because it's challenging. That's what has that similarity to human trafficking survivors as well as to domestic violence survivors. Because they say it takes about 12 to 15 times for them to actually leave and come back before they leave for good. So it's a long period of time. So the impact, this is actually a quote from a book. Lisa Williams did this book. She's a survivor and someone who I've spoken with on many occasions and helped me out with the development of my program at Baltimore Child Abuse Center. And what she did was she put a whole bunch of different survivor stories and packed it in one book. And one survivor wrote this. Can somebody read that? How about, can you read that? Can you read what's on the screen?
I became willing to give up my childhood. It was stolen. I became willing to leave my soul. It was kidnapped. I became willing to consume my amateur substances. They were forced. I became willing to recruit other girls. It was important. I became willing to steal their childhood. It was necessary to save mine.
So that's the impact. She didn't want to do all of these things, but she felt compelled in that she had to do these things. This is the person who was also a bottom girl, also known as the bottom bitch. We don't say that. We say the bottom girl more now because we don't want to use those terms because that's what the trafficker calls them. They call them the female dogs, and we're not trying to put that on that individual. And what we found out is that the difference is I have a colleague who does this training very well about the bottom girl and all of the different dynamics and the differences between the transatlantic slave trade and how the bottom is. So, have you guys all studied colonial slavery? Okay. So, who is the bottom in colonial slavery? The what? The field workers. But who would be the bottom girl? Who would be that one who is right underneath? Let's give you the picture. Organized crime is trafficking. You've got your head honcho, who basically is the trafficker. You have the next person in line, who's considered to be the bottom, who takes the fault for everything that takes place, but their responsibility is to make sure that everybody is in line, that they're doing the recruiting, that they're giving out the money, that they're receiving the money, and they're giving it all to their pimp, their daddy. So, in colonial slavery, who would be that person who is still enslaved, but also is giving out orders? Say it again. The overseer. The overseer. Or another name for the overseer was the driver. But the overseer and the driver were still slaves. They weren't living free. They still basically had to answer to who? Their who? Their master. Yes. Who is the trafficker. So who are they? Oh, they're all these people right here. They're everybody. They're our family, they're our parents, they're our doctors, they're our lawyers, they're our teachers, they're our professors, our priests, And our strangers too, and our peers. Because trafficking can happen so easily for anyone. Then we have the economics of trafficking. Why is this such a big booming business? Why does this continue to happen? Because we like cheap labor. Because it's a corporate business that's growing, and individuals that use other individuals as disposable products. So demand, we have a high demand and a small, we have a high demand which causes there to be a big supply. Because if the buyers weren't buying it, then that means the demand goes down. So you wouldn't have to have a supply. So how do we decrease it? We basically increase responsibility for employers, that basically they're not providing cheap labor. One of the things we're trying to do in the state of Maryland is get better labor trafficking laws, because we don't have really strong labor trafficking laws. We don't have strong ones. And we've done great with sex trafficking. We're getting better with sex trafficking, but we don't have the labor trafficking laws. We tried to pass one for the past 3 years. We've been trying to pass one for the migrant workers that come into Eastern Shore. And our legislators just keep saying to us, they're adults. They can come here. But the conditions that they're working on are deplorable, that they're staying in. So we need to be able to protect them. We should be able to have these laws that protect them. We inform our consumers about trafficking and its victimizations. And we educate people on the harmfulness of commercial sex, so that people are not walking in and saying to those looking at a person for outside of who they are and calling them dirty or nasty or sluts or whores or easy, because they don't know why they have made a choice to do something, because it was forced and they didn't take the time to even ask them, how are they doing, or provide care to them. Here's a sample profit margin. Now this is really, really low balling. Low balling. But we wanted to put this in there. I do this training with our task force, and we put this in there because if you say that for one sex act is $50, if you do 12 in one day for 365 days of the year, your trafficker is making over $1 million with one person. And in their stables, there's usually about 7. The stable is their family, the stable is their piece, are all of the people that they're victimizing. They call it their stable. They set it up that daddy is the head for the women. Because what are they trying to emulate?
A family.
A family, absolutely. Here's another job description. What's my time? Okay. But I'm going to pass that one so we can get to this one. Can I have another volunteer to read this? Yes.
Golden.
Yes. Before you read, let me set this up for you. This is actually written. One of my colleagues, the one I was talking about, who actually does that presentation about the bottom girl, she said after she did a presentation, a mother came up to her and said, "Thank you for shining a light on what my daughter has been going through. I know my daughter is the bottom, and I'm trying to get her help, and I don't know how." She said, "This is the letter that I found on her internet, her email, that came from her trafficker to her."
You have to force yourself to not run. Force yourself to believe that I'm not going to abandon you. But most importantly, you have to trust that I mean all the things I say to you. You are mine. I take that very, very seriously. You have to take it just as seriously. I'm the first and only person you come to when you have problems, fears, or just need someone to listen to you to vent. And I am the only one that you come to if you need your other needs handled. I'm your dominant. I am your brother. I am your friend. I am also your owner. How can you be submissive to me when you can't give up all the things that have hurt you and will continue to do so until you give me all of you inside and out? I am yours as long as you are mine. I protect you. I shield you from the world. I love you, and I will demand to control you as long as you reciprocate by letting me. I can't see that first.
Do these things without any fear. You are mine, my toy, all of you. Is that a love letter? The things that jump out. I'm not going to abandon you. You are mine. And he put mine in capital letters and bolded it. So he was making a statement. You are my property, and I own you. I am the first and only person that you come to when you have problems or fears. I don't care that you're still living with your parents. I don't care that you have a close relationship with your mother or your sisters. You don't come to them about anything. If you need a tampon, you come to me. You don't go to them for anything. I am your dominant. I am your brother. I am your friend. I am also your owner. Oh, and this is wonderful. I protect you, and yeah, I love you. I love you, and I will demand to control you. False narrative coming out. You are mine, my toy. All of you. This is the impact that is happening because of the enslavement and the bondage that this individual is feeling, and the vulnerabilities that actually allowed for them to get there. It doesn't matter that they were living with a loving mother or they were in a home. Adolescents basically seek attention. Everybody has a vulnerability. It doesn't matter how young you are or how old you are. We all have vulnerabilities. And what traffickers do is they exploit the vulnerability. They take the time to watch. They take the time to look and to see who actually they can get and what vulnerability they might be able to exploit. And because adolescents really like to have attention, they become they become a high target. And youth. So, quickly, what's happening in Maryland? This is just basically our legislative things of all of the laws that have taken place to actually support victims of trafficking, starting with 1910, where the Mann Act came in. However, the Mann Act was very limited because it only spoke to women going from one country to the next, and for the fact that they had to be going from one country to the next for some type of commercial sexual act. So that means they couldn't go across the street, and that means that it couldn't be for any other purposes. And so they knew that that was a very restricting and limitation, which is why all these other laws came into view, because you just can't do that. From the beginning, we had the Trafficking Victim Protection Act in 2000, but it was 2007 when Maryland actually got their first law. And then we have increased our laws over the years, ending with 2017 last year, where we changed the trafficking definition laws for children. And also in 2018, we're looking at our Safe Harbor Working Group expanding, and hopefully that we can get fiscal support for it. Because the Safe Harbor law basically says that, oops, did I skip it? Oh, maybe it's on another slide. Well, the Safe Harbor law in 2018 basically says that we just want to make sure we understand that that no one 17 years or younger can actually ever be victimized or consent to any type of commercial sexual act. So other states have this intact. What we wanted to do in Maryland is, it's been a 5-year process because we wanted to first look at all the other states. We wanted to make sure our survivor services and victim services were up to par so that we could actually provide services to these youth instead of just giving them over to the Juvenile Justice Center, because that's also what was happening. Common areas of recruitment are schools, malls, bus stations, group homes. Why do you think group homes are actually such a high place of recruitment? Yes.
Sometimes group homes are like 4 females, and then 2 like they're vulnerable. So usually when you're in a group home, you're both sometimes.
Exactly. Because if you're in a group home, that means you're not living at your home. So that means you were removed. Social media has been an increase. Yeah, that should have been flipped. The numbers that Polaris Project says that for the state of Maryland in 2017, there were 115 cases, even though there were 444 hotline calls. Since Polaris Project has been up, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center also, since 2007, they have had almost 900 cases come out of over 3,500 calls that come into them. The majority of the cases are still for females, but there are still males. And the majority of the cases are adults, but it's still a high number for youth. And there are calls that even survivors make themselves. University of Maryland partnered with the Department of Human Services, and through 2013 and 2016, they found an increase of reports for child trafficking by 488%. They saw that 200 individuals were being victimized out of 17 counties in the state of Maryland, with the majority of them being between the range of 14 to 17, and Baltimore City being the highest. The contributing factors is that we've got the block of Baltimore City. Everybody know where the block is? Yes, no, maybe. Baltimore Street, downtown. Centrally located, we have the I-95 corridor. We're right near 270 and I-70. We have ports, and we have a high place of demand with sporting events, tourism, and casinos. Di Zhang. Di Zhang is from China. She basically, we've been trying to arrest, she's been arrested multiple times for having a brothel in massage parlors in Baltimore County. She has been actually prosecuted from 2009 all the way up to 2016. She has never served any jail time. Yes.
So trafficking is a common thing here in Baltimore?
More common than you think. Yes. What's a massage parlor? Where you go and get a massage. They're going in there. So look at these houses. Now, would you go into a massage parlor that looked like this? No. Okay. But these are houses, and they have a sign that say they're a massage parlor. So basically, it was actually a brothel, because they would go in with the intent to get a massage, but the persons who were giving the massage were actually the victims, who basically would have to give the massage. They would have the alcohol set up, because you have to clean yourself before you go in, because that'll not leave so much evidence, so that when you go back home and then you do that, that's what law enforcement tell us. And then all of her victims were from China. So she basically had a ruse that was going, where they would come over and they had to sign this contract, and she had so many torturous things in there by saying that if you didn't do this, you were going to be tortured just like the how they did the tortures in the Zhang dynasty, that you were going to be beheaded, that all these things were going to happen to you. And then there was a letter that was written and signed by the parliament. And so in their mindsets, they really thought that all these things were going to happen, and they didn't want to go back to China at all. So these were these situations. The reason why she has not been convicted yet is because they're adults, and the judges were saying, but they signed the contract, and they're adults. So how do we know they don't have full understanding? So that's another conversation. Yes?
So when they go into like the brothel,
Yes.
do regular people go into the brothel?
Sure. What do you mean regular people? You mean cops and priests and...
No, I'm just saying, like, if me and my mom walking down the street, and like, oh, a massage parlor, like,
Sure.
you just walk in.
Yes.
And then what happens? Like,
Well, because they'll know. They'll know who the people are who don't have any understanding of what they just walked into, because of how you ask for what you want.
is she crying in the
No, not at all. I mean, it didn't look like she was crying, but that was Dizette. Yes. Yeah, I don't know if she was. We don't know if she was trafficked when she was younger. I like to highlight her because people don't think that they're female traffickers. She was not a bottom. She was a female trafficker because she was extorting these women, and she had the Chinese government on her side. Yes. Di Zhang. Yes, you can look it up. Z-H-A-N-G is her last name, Baltimore County. Jeremy Naughton, also known as Germs, Montgomery County case. He was indicted in 2012, and he was convicted in 2013. He had a large stable of about 15, it was between 12 and 15 girls. And he was guilty on all accounts of sex trafficking, conspiracy, transportation from one state to the next, one jurisdiction to the next for trafficking purposes, and arms. So he was not a Romeo. There are different type of pimps. He was not a Romeo pimp. He was a guerrilla pimp. So he ruled by authority and by force and by threat, very strongly. Ralph, he's a buyer
Oh my god.
from,
That's right next to where I live.
you see it? It makes
Is
familiar.
that next to QL?
It's in Montgomery County.
Yeah, it's next to Quincy Trafficking. That's across the street.
This is Montgomery County, and
She said, oh my god.
okay, we found the familiar place. This is a familiar place. So Ralph is 13. Okay. Ralph is 2013. He was arrested, indicted, and sentenced in 2013 for the solicitation of a minor for sex trafficking. Because he was going to, he knew that he knew that he was going to have sex with a 15-year-old and didn't care that she was 15 years old. And it was actually an operation that the Montgomery County Police did, and they actually, I mean, to listen to what he says is ridiculous. But they got him, and he really didn't have a defense because they got everything of all of his words on tape, and nobody could say that he was being coerced. So he picked up the 15-year-old at the McDonald's, and he wanted to make sure that she had her cheerleading outfit, and that he was going to drive her in his BMW to her house while her mother was at work so he could victimize her, basically.
Could we
Yes.
hear what he said or no?
I can't play it. I tried to. It didn't work. Sorry. And this, yes.
I love her.
The Houston Mall is also a really big area for human trafficking. Do you happen to know how many cases that come out of that?
That come out of the mall, I do not know. We are doing a graph of how many cases that are come. There is an actual map that says how many cases come out of different places. And so far, Montgomery County, Baltimore City, Prince George's County are your top 4. So, and I know you guys have to leave, so what I will do is just tell you this, and I can answer any of your questions, but if you have any questions, would you like to ask me any questions now? Yes. I'm sorry.